On this episode of the Dr. Tina Show, we are going to be talking all things peptides, what the recent updates are since the big FDA meeting, who should be taking peptides, who are they best for, who are they not ideal for, and so much more, including a bit about HRT. So let's jump in. Okay, guys, so a lot has happened in the past few weeks, and I want to get you updated and let you know where things stand, at least so far as I understand it. On July 23rd and 24th of this past month, 2026, the FDA's Pharmacy Compounding Advisory Committee met and reviewed 7 peptides that had been taken off the market in the fall of 2023. They'd been put on category 2, which means do not compound. So we lost access to a bunch of medications virtually overnight at that point. And it snuck up on everybody. I don't know anybody who wasn't sideswiped by that. That was not great because there's a lot of clinics that are utilizing a lot of these peptides as medications for their patients, and it was a devastating blow. So what has happened since then is the gray market has exploded. There's these research use only peptides that are out there you can buy online. And then the drama around that is that virtually overnight, tons of companies showed up out of nowhere. And the FDA has basically been playing whack-a-mole. Some of these companies seem to be dispensing legitimate product according to what their certificate of analysis says. Others of them, who knows? I am not telling you to utilize research only peptides. Those are for rats. If you're doing research at home with rats, it's not for human use. And then even more recently, digging into some of older studies and then some new information coming out, not always is what's listed on the bottle in the bottle with some of these. So there may not be any of the active substance that is claimed on the bottle. There may be contaminants. There may be lipopolysaccharides, which are not great, very inflammatory. There may be all kinds of different things. And so it's literally the Wild West, and it's just gone cuckoo cuckoo. So what has happened, as I understand it, and I'm going to have Dr. Jim Lavalle on the podcast soon so we can get clarification because he was part of that meeting. He was one of the top guys in there really going to bat for us to get peptides back onto the prescription pad for doctors. And what he has shared with me is that, and what many of you have seen out there, we've got BPC 157, KPV, TB 500, MOTS-C, Epitalin, and CMAX have been, the committee voted to recommend these. This does not mean they're FDA approved. This does not mean they are even yet available for compounding. I am going to just wait and see how that shakes out because I get newsletters from the big compounding pharmacies and I'm just kind of waiting to hear what the word is on the street. And when I do, I'll let you guys know. Now, what does this mean? Well, it's a gray zone, and it's been a kind of a gray zone actually, with a category 2 listing that they were previously on that was sort of a do not compound. Some compounding pharmacies were still dispensing them under different names. A lot of doctors were white labeling, meaning they were buying research only peptides and putting labels on them and putting them into their clinics and dispensing them to patients, and the patients did not know the difference. I think I just saw that Alabama outlawed that. So no research use only peptides in the clinic. I follow several legal accounts on Instagram that are lawyers specializing in either, medi spas, aesthetic type of spa services. And they have been recommending for months now, some even years, do not dispense these out of your clinic. I would never, and I have never, and I would never in a million years tell a patient to go get something that I cannot legally prescribe. It just doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem like a good idea. So that's where that's at. That doesn't mean you can go run out and get these. Definitely now we have to kind of wait and see again how this shakes out. Somebody asked me the other day, does this mean these will be available over the counter? Heck no. These are going to be available through clinical oversight, through a doctor who knows what they're doing with a prescription. And as much of a libertarian as I am, and as much of a proponent of a free market as I am, I think when it comes down to injecting a medication, it's not safe unless you are sourcing it from somewhere that is trusted, that is doing the regulatory oversight, that is going through the steps and jumping through the hoops. And if it's not, then I don't trust it. And to be totally honest with you, I have used research only peptides, and oftentimes a whole lot of nothing happens. And we're going to get into that. We're going to talk about that just next. But for now, I don't even know if you can run out to your doctor. I've talked to several of my colleagues and we're still unclear as to, are we allowed to prescribe these yet? What's going on? And so still waiting to hear back from Dr. Lavalle and just kind of what the landscape shakes out to be. But as of right now, we are at least headed in a better direction. And I think that's exciting. I think that some of these listed I've used extensively in practice, and they are quite nice to have around in the right patient. And we're going to talk about that just next, because that matters more, I think, than the peptide and its availability. All right. So what do I mean by the right patient? My background was in regenerative medicine, meaning I would apply natural substances intra-articularly and into enthesis points, ligament and tendon enthesis points where ligament and tendon meet bone. And I would treat with injection therapy, with regenerative injection therapies, I would treat musculoskeletal conditions. That is what I did for the bulk of my practice. That is what I did for a very long time. That was what I was very well known for in my profession. I've taught hundreds of doctors how to do the same, and I'm very good at it. I'm a chiropractor too, and so I have the ability to palpate, and my musculoskeletal hand skills are, I mean, chiropractors, bar none, are the masters of that. And so that really helped my skill set, and it helped me get really good. And I very much came up with my own technique, and I taught it to a lot of doctors. And under my naturopathic license, I was legal to do that in the state of Oregon, in the state of Arizona, and many other states. So what I found in that clinical practice, I want to preface with, I firmly believe that any type of therapeutic applied to a body, whether it be hormone replacement therapy, peptides, regenerative injection therapy, stem cells, exosomes, all the things you're hearing about out there, they do not work well in those who are metabolically compromised. And 94% roughly of US adults are cardiometabolically compromised. So that leaves us with roughly like 6.8% of US adults who are in a position to be in healing mode. And when I was in my big practice, before I shut that all down during COVID and got the heck out of Oregon just recently, right? Because I was over it. I had a application only process because I felt it was incredibly unethical to apply regenerative injection therapies to patients that it wasn't going to take well in, because there's no code to bill for these services. And I didn't take insurance anyway, but there wasn't, even if I did, these were not coverable services. And so these were payment at time of service, people's money with their credit card or cash out of their pocket. And I certainly was not going to charge somebody or even apply a treatment when it wasn't going to do diddly squat. And I got called a lot of names by my profession, and I got accused of being elitist, and I got all kinds of jabs came at me. And I was going, there was just no version where I wasn't going to hold my ground on that. And so I had patients apply, and I'll tell you who I took. I took people who were already strength training, because it wasn't, I want to start strength training and then we'll get to work. It doesn't work that way. These therapies did not land well, take well. These patients did not respond well unless they were already actively, decently in good shape. They had to be decently healthy. They had to be in good healing mode. Good healing mode means good metabolic health. Good healing mode means regulated blood sugars. Good healing mode means your hormones are optimized, usually utilizing some version of HRT. Good healing mode means when you cut your finger, you heal up really fast. Your fingernails grow and they're thick, not like fungus thick, because sometimes you get thickening with disease processes. I'm talking healthy. I'm talking vital. Their hair wasn't snapping off and falling out. These were healthy, vital, vibrant people. That's who I took. That's who these therapies landed well in. And I don't care how many names people wanted to call me or still want to call me about it. It is incredibly unethical for the vast majority of regenerative medicine doctors that I see out there, taking anybody who walks in the door, taking their money and applying these treatments knowing it's not going to take very well. Now, to their defense, some might just be bleeding hearts and say, well, we got to try. No, trust me, like truth here. I've been at this a long time. And before I had a medical license to apply these therapeutics, I was working with a doctor who had been doing this for decades. And he was also adamant that they be in really good health condition before he would treat them. It was just a complete lost leader otherwise. Patients who were not in good metabolic health, were not in good overall immune status, were not optimized, either would not get any response or they would flare, worse yet. And that was terrible. I mean, you take someone who has a frozen shoulder and they are a hot mess of inflammation and they are a hot mess of metabolic health, and you pull out their blood and you concentrate it down to get those platelets out in something like platelet rich plasma. You've probably heard of that. PRP, PRF, there's all different versions now. All you're doing is concentrating that hot mess of inflammation and shooting it back into that hot mess of a joint. And now that joint goes bonkers and it either freezes up worse or it swells. It's not great. This is not great. Now, that's not to say that you have to be the epitome of health in order for these therapeutics to work, but you have to be in relatively decent health. I would not treat diabetics because anytime you stick a needle into a diabetic, you are running the risk of infection. And when blood sugars are that whacked out, immune system response and healing response is completely whacked out. And all of the biochemical signaling cascades that have to happen in order for healing to occur don't occur well in those who are struggling with diabetes and have really elevated blood sugars and completely jacked up insulin levels. Same goes for people if they were malnourished. If I wouldn't treat vegans, no shade on vegans, but I could not get them better. I wouldn't treat athletes that were doing chronic cardio like marathon runners. They just didn't heal. They had to come back over and over and over again. And it was crazy. You know who healed really, really well? You can guess. Young men with good testosterone levels, fit women with healthy, optimized hormones. And by the way, it's very difficult to get a woman's hormones optimized, especially in middle age, if she is not metabolically sound. And it is impossible to be metabolically sound if you are not lifting with progressive overload to near failure multiple times a week and building muscle. That's the only way to build muscle, by the way. There's no argument here. I'll go off on a tangent on that later. I'll come back to that. The bottom line is that all the same rules apply when it comes to peptide therapy. And I know this is going to piss off so many people. And I know so many people are going to just like spam out in my comments right now and go sideways. And I know a lot of doctors are going to be mad. And I know a lot of people are going to be mad. But I'm telling you, God's honest truth. On my mentor's grave, I am promising you that these peptides do not land worth a damn unless you were already optimized. So what does that mean? That means these peptides are reserved for the 6.8% of US adults who are healthy and metabolically sound. And the rest of them are just being used because doctors either are new to this and excited, or my guess, it's a massive cash cow. So I will die on that hill. I will argue this all day because I have the licks to back it up. I spent decades in regenerative medicine with my mentor and then in my own practice. I know who heals well and I know who doesn't. And if you want to talk to me about it, you better be an orthopedic surgeon or you better be somebody who very regularly watches tissues heal and applies treatments and then watches regeneration occur in a patient. Because if you're not, then you don't get to have an opinion on this. And the vast majority of doctors that I see bum rushing into these conferences to learn about peptides are not metabolically healthy themselves. And they don't go to the gym themselves. Like, I don't even know how somebody could say that they are a longevity doctor or that they are a functional medicine doctor and not be actually quite fit. It doesn't make sense because there's no version of longevity where you don't have good muscle mass. Telling you, you don't have to be a musclehead. You don't have to be a big meathead. But I'm talking to the ladies here right now in particular. Your ticket to not breaking a hip and not losing independence and not losing the ability to stay in your home and stay where you want to live into your old age, till the day you die, is contingent on your strength. So the true test of longevity to me is, can you get up and down off the floor without any assistance easily and readily? Can you catch yourself if you fall and not break a bone? I just read a stat: 1 in 2 women over 50 are going to break a bone. And it's probably due to their flimsy ass bones. Do you know how many women fall on an outstretched hand and break their radial head? Older ladies, ladies over 60, over 70, all the time. It's constant. It's constant. And then I'll tell you what happens, because this has happened to people I love. This has happened to multiple patients. I'm telling them for years, you have osteopenia, you have osteopenia. What do you think osteopenia is? It is you're on the path to osteoporosis. You just are, it's just like pre-diabetes into diabetes. You're on the same path. All the same terrible things are happening. You just haven't been diagnosed there yet. And so until you get the scary diagnosis, you don't do diddly squat. You sit around and hope it'll get better. And I'm telling you, unless you are actively fighting bone loss, it is not going to get better. If you are not actively fighting muscle loss, it is not going to get better. And so the only way to do that is through progressive overload, which there are lots of different ways to progress. It doesn't mean you have to go heavier, although that is my favorite, but you can't go heavier forever. And you certainly can't go heavier fast when you're just starting out. But logistically, you are progressing. And so I highly encourage you to hire a coach or learn about strength training. We're talking about it right now. I actually just started a group in my Menopause Rebellion community, and we're going to do regular calls. We're just going to shoot the shit on strength training, because there's strength and conditioning coaches in there, personal trainers, Pilates instructors, and we're just going to talk all things strength training for middle-aged women. I think I'm going to call it the Strength Society. So that's going to be inside the Menopause Rebellion. I'll make sure you guys have the link. It's school.com, SKOOL.com/Dr. Tina. You can join. There's so much good stuff happening in there. I'm building out a huge curriculum. We have live calls every week. We're going to be adding these bi-monthly calls, talking strength. If you are a middle-aged woman, this is the place to be. I promise you, all the things you need to know are inside this community or will be built out in here soon. So anyway, there's my shameless plug on that. So progressive overload, basically you have to stimulate the tissue to grow. And if you don't progressively overload it, it will not do anything. So you guys, I go to the gym probably every other day, and I keep trying to find my middle-aged and older ladies to be friends with that are doing it right. And I watch all these beautiful women, whether they're really lean or they're not so lean. They're all just, for the most part, and I was trying to explain this to my husband without sounding like I don't appreciate the fact that they're in there and they're putting in the work and they're trying. I totally acknowledge that. But they're not getting anywhere, and they're completely wasting their time. Because I saw a gal yesterday, she was probably in her late 60s, and I was like, you go girl. She's on the adductor machine, and I'm so excited that she's working her glutes, and I'm like, you go girl. She gets up, she has absolutely no butt, which is, you guys, that is a huge sign of low vitality. Your glutes are an absolute indicator of your overall hormonal health and your overall vitality. It's a sign of youth and vitality. And you can maintain that if you build them. But if you have an absolutely missing butt, or worse yet, it's almost like inverted, which I saw a lot in clinical practice, and I see a lot of this in the gym. So this gal has that rear end, and I'm not judging it. I'm just, as a physician who understands this, I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, that is such a bad sign as we age. And then on top of it, I look at the weight stack, it's the plates with the pins. She's on the lowest one. It's 5 pounds, maybe 10 pounds. And I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, I wanted to go over there. I always want to go over and just be like, let me help you. This is not, that woman could have easily had it up to 40 or 50. She was my height. She had a decent build. She did not look like a frailing lady. She wasn't headed towards frailty. She clearly goes in there and does the work. I see her often, but that completely inverted. And when I say inverted, okay, so when patients would lay down on my table for treatment and they would lay on their stomach, your sacrum should be, kind of a flat structure. Say these are the feet and this is the head, sacrum. And then you should have a rounded mound coming off of the sacral attachments. Those are your gluteal muscles. and they round around and they come in and they insert on that bony outcrop on your lateral hips that are so sore on us middle-aged ladies, because as we lose estrogen, we get glute medius tendinopathy. Very common. If your hips hurt on both sides when you lay down at night, you need some estrogen. So anyway, it should be nice rounded glutes. When women age and they do not protect their muscle and they are losing their vitality, that doesn't just go flat, it sinks in, because those bones, those ilium, those are your two pelvic bones, have a curvature and they're curved out so that they can hold the muscle. The muscle should be a nice shape, a nice muscle should be filling in that divot and then coming and mounding out over the top. And these women are literally it's sunken in. And I know that many of you listening know exactly what I'm talking about. If you have recently completely lost your butt, or you have never had one, or you're aging and it is going away, that is a sign of trouble in my book. And if you were my patient sitting in my office, I would tell you very frankly that your vitality is low and that overall your hormonal status is probably low. And you are, I believe, I have no data on this because no one studied it. I firmly believe that those are the women who are going to break a hip. Just plain and simple. If you've always struggled with your metabolic health and you've never had a butt and it's always been flat, now is your sign. Go work on your glutes. Go build your glutes. I'm teaching the ladies inside my Menopause Rebellion how to build their glutes, because that's like key number one. I don't even care about your arms. I care about your arms because I care if you get frozen shoulder or you fuck up your shoulder. That's it. Like, I care because I don't want you to hurt your shoulders. I care because too many women who should not be are hoisting suitcases in the overhead on the airplanes. I used to make a lot of money off those women. I'll tell you who hurts their shoulders. Middle-aged and older women who are deconditioned, throwing things they shouldn't, that are way too heavy overhead, like a suitcase in the overhead bin in the airplane. Just check the bag. It's totally worth the $25 to $45. Trust me, just check the bag. It's fine. Save yourself the headache. Number two was women with large sized dogs who allowed themselves to become deconditioned and their hormones would wane. And that's not their fault that their hormones waned, because a whole generation was completely screwed out of HRT. And I think it's criminal what happened to them. But they would be in that kind of fragile shoulder state, very deconditioned, the kind of shoulder where I put the ultrasound probe down and there's literally nothing there. I can barely see a muscle belly. There's just no deltoids. There's just nothing there. There's skin and there's bone and there's some fat and there's a little tiny wisp of a muscle. And those are the shoulders that are going to end up in big trouble and probably frozen because they're going to get injured. Anyway, these women would have dogs that were large, and I love a big dog, don't get me wrong. But if your dog's going to lunge on a walk and you're not prepared for it, you're going to have a very expensive shoulder injury, a very common injury, very, very common. The other one was when hot yoga was all the rage. I don't know what was going on where you lived, but we were in Oregon and hot yoga was a thing for a minute. And a lot of women were hurting themselves in hot yoga. They were already going in hypermobile. People who are hypermobile like to do yoga. It's a thing. And so they already are Gumby. And then they would go in and lean into hot, warm tissues. And so if you are a hot yoga devotee, be careful. You can really overextend yourself without realizing it, because as those tissues heat up and you get really hot and you're focused on how damn hot it is in there, next thing you know, you're injuring a shoulder. My point is, if you're kind of in that camp, peptides probably aren't going to help you. If you have fibromyalgia, peptides probably aren't going to help you. Regenerative injection therapy is probably not going to help you very much. Those are all deconditioned metabolic syndromes. I wish there was a term for it because it's not just metabolic dysfunction and it's not just immune dysregulation and it's not just deconditioning. It's like a triad that happens to virtually every woman unless she's actively fighting it in the gym and actually lifting appropriately. So unless she's doing progressive overload, she's not really protecting her bones or her muscles. And I'm sorry to say that. I know a lot of you go to the gym regularly and you are busting it out with your little dumbbells and you are trying to do it at home with your little dumbbells and you're not buying heavier weights as you get stronger. And I get messages from all of you all the time. And I I hear from the women inside my community, and the vast majority of women I would say that I see at the gym that are my age and older are lifting completely wrong and wasting their time. Sure, maybe they're getting some mobility out of it. You get thin enough and you keep a muscle active, and it's going to have that like sinewy Demi Moore kind of look that I know is very hot right now, that very thin, slightly malnourished. No shade on Demi. There's a lot of actresses doing this right now. That's a look right now. That is not a look for longevity. And that requires a tremendous amount of weight loss and low fat on the body. So that body composition is one that is going to show off whatever's underneath. And so I've seen a lot of people get really, really thin and really not have any strength whatsoever and not be in very good shape at all, but they look cut because they're so thin, because their body fat is so lean. They're so lean, right? That's not a great look for longevity. That doesn't tend to go well. In fact, there's some data showing that having a little bit of extra fat on you as you age is protective. So conversation for another day. We'll do a podcast on it. But the bottom line here is, if you are not in good healing mode, you seem to keep getting injured consistently, everything hurts all the time, probably not a great candidate for regenerative injection therapy, which means you're probably not a great candidate for peptide therapy either. And I listened to my own advice. Okay. So I went through a phase from about 2022 to 2024 where I was working out regularly, but I was in so much pain because my estrogen was falling out of the bottom, and I couldn't quite figure it out, and I couldn't quite get it right. And I honestly in some denial, and my lab markers hadn't really shifted enough to make me think that I needed estrogen replacement therapy on the regular. I was using a topical that can be hit or miss with absorption. I wasn't really ready to go to a patch and do steady state. I still was, pretty young. And it wasn't until I had this whole litany of injuries and tendinous issues, like literally they were all tendinous issues. And I just was tearing and not healing so frequently. And it was like my poor strength and conditioning coach was like, "What is wrong with you, girl? Like, this is constant." And so anyway, it was kind of hit or miss there. And then I got myself on some steady state estrogen, which would be the transdermal patch. And I was like, booyah, the skies opened. Everything was great. That initial honeymoon period doesn't always last, but it definitely, that is a good moment. And the benefits do seem to persist. And then in 24, with all the stress from the GLP-1 conversation, I herniated a disc in my back, and it was gnarly. It was a high lumbar disc. And the latest, and I've known this forever because my mentor taught it to me, but the latest data really is finally getting the point across. Most discs heal without surgery. So there was no way I was going to go have a procedure done or have surgery done. So that healed, but I will say that there's a splinting and a bracing that happens for a long time with the musculature in the area as your body's cleaning up the mess. And there's inflammation, and that's just the process of the body cleaning up the mess. It's doing what it's supposed to do. It was working. Everything was working. That period of time, I was not able to be as consistent as I needed to be in the gym, and my stress was really high, and I was traveling a lot because I was talking about the microdosing GLP-1s all over the place. And so I was always on a plane. I was always traveling. I was always eating food outside of the house that I wasn't cooking, and I had no control over the ingredients. And my metabolic health started going sideways. Even on estrogen, things were going sideways. I was not as consistent with my workouts. It was like stressor after stressor, and I wasn't walking my talk as much as I needed to be. And so anyway, everyone kept saying, "Why don't you get injected? Why don't you go have somebody, one of your regenerative injection therapy friends or someone you trained, why don't you go get treated?" And I kept saying, because it's not going to take. And in fact, it might just flare me. I have such a weird immune system, and my pain is such an intimate part of my autoimmune disease that I don't feel like pissing off the region more. So I'm not going to do it until I get my shit together and I get a handle on things, and then I will proceed if I need to. And did I use peptides during that period? The one time I did a cycle was during the disc injury. And I used many of the ones that have just been approved. So by the PCAT committee. So I share all this because I wasn't trying to be insubordinate and not get the treatment I needed. I knew from my own clinical experience that where I was at needed to be cleaned up a bit before any of these things were going to take, or it was just expensive therapy that probably was not going to do much. And more importantly, could have flared me worse. Not the peptides, but the regenerative injection therapies. So I took my own medicine on that and I got to Arizona. That was a big reason for moving here. I got to Arizona. I've been so much more active here. I've gained way more weight, which is funny because that's a story for another day. But I feel like my spine feels a bazillion times better. And I don't even think I need any therapeutics now. I feel great. I just needed to get moving again. And I needed to get out of the rain and I needed to get out of, I think the house I lived in had mold. I just needed to get out of there. I don't know. I had to get out of Oregon. I had to get out from underneath that stifling nonsense that was Oregon. And once I did, I was like, woohoo. And my pain came down and I'm in this dry heat and there's, lots of factors, but I am way more active. My metabolic health is in way better shape. It's not in shambles anymore. It was in shambles for a hot second there. And now it's funny. I sent my labs to my ND when it was in shambles and she's like, I don't see the problem. These look great. And you know what? Compared to the average 51-year-old woman or 50-year-old woman or whatever I was at the time, they did look outstanding. For me, they were not acceptable. But for her, for what she normally sees, I mean, that's a testament to like just how unhealthy and what a mess Gen X is in. And that's not a judgment. That is just like God's honest truth. We are a hot mess of a generation, and for a lot of different reasons, but slinging peptides first is not the answer. I get messages all the time from people saying, what peptide should I take? I have this condition. What should I do for this? I have, blah, blah, blah. This is, I mean, they send me their whole health history. It's bizarre, but they'll tell me all about themselves. And then they'll ask me, what should they take? And I'm thinking, lady, you don't look like you know what the inside of a gym looks like. And that is not a judgment. That is the truth. I go look at their profile and I'm like, this woman is not exercising. She is not working out regularly. And I know you think I can't tell. Oh, you can't tell by looking at somebody. Yes, I can. I'm very good at it. I can tell when somebody's metabolic health is compromised. I can tell by the pallor of their skin. I can tell by their waist circumference. I can tell if they have turgor in their muscles and that they're being used. Now, I'm not saying you need to be lean by any means. I'm just saying I can tell when somebody works out or not. And I can tell when somebody has adequate muscle mass or is under muscled just by looking at them. I was literally trained to do that and I'm very good at it. So yes, I can tell. And until that piece of the puzzle is intact, then there's no point in slinging peptides around. And so the next question is, well, what about everyone else? I get asked that every time I'm on a podcast. Like, you keep saying that these are reserved for metabolically optimized people. What about everybody else? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but I do know that if you've got doctors and bro science guys and all these other people trying to pull you in to their circle of influence and sell you something, and you don't know what the inside of a gym looks like, and you don't know how to lift weights, and you're not doing it regularly, and you're not getting enough protein, and you don't know what outside looks like because you never leave and you never go outside, and your circadian rhythm's all screwed up and your sleep is all screwed up, and you don't have your hormones optimized already because you haven't found someone to help you with your HRT, there is no point in throwing expensive peptides on top of it. There's just not. Like, it doesn't work. I've done it. I've tried it with so many patients who were like, please just try it on me. Okay, we try it. Doesn't work. Doesn't take. Nothing happens. And it's frustrating. Yes, I understand. It's totally frustrating. I have been the person that it didn't take on. I get it, but it doesn't change the facts. Those are the facts. And when it comes to GLP-1s, I'm just going to repeat myself like a broken record. Microdosing is not for weight loss. It is not a weight loss strategy. It is also reserved for those who are metabolically healthy. Here's what happens if you try microdosing for inflammation or for pain or for your rheumatologic conditions or whatever else you maybe want to try it for. That tiny dose will work for a while. And then more often than not, because I've heard from so many of you about this happening, and it's happened to me too, more often than not, that tiny little dose will stop working because you cannot override a hot mess with a microdose. You cannot override a hot mess with a macrodose. Now, you can force somebody's biochemistry and biology to rev up pathways and stifle an appetite to the point where people do lose weight. I don't suggest that. That does not lead to lasting results. In fact, if you don't strength train and protect your muscle and take really good care of yourself while you're on a GLP-1, whether it be a microdose or a more standard dose for weight loss, which you're going to have to do if you want to move the needle on weight loss, guys, like 9 times out of 10, you're going to have to go up into a standard dosing tiers. If you don't do all the things that I preach daily on here in conjunction, you will not have lasting results. You will be one of those people who comes off and becomes one of the statistics of like, oh, they gained all the weight back really fast, because that's what's happening to most people. You will become one of the many kind of fallout of the GLP-1 thing. And not to say that you can even go off of it, because if you are using it for appreciable weight loss and you really do have the disease of obesity, you're probably going to stay on it. But that's not the conversation today. My point being is your microdose is going to stop working. It's going to, for immediately, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, this was a miracle. If it works, it doesn't work for everyone. If it works, you're going to, and say you are one of those metabolically unsound, kind of hot mess of inflammation, like the vast majority of middle-aged women are, unfortunately. And again, not a judgment. I've just seen all the labs. I've seen their labs and I'm like, whoa, the trains are coming off the tracks here. Peptides work when the wheels start shaking on the car. If the wheels are a little like, oh, something's a little off, I'm hearing a little clunk in the engine. When the wheels have fallen off the car, peptides are not going to do anything. And I think it is unethical for doctors to think that it will, and to try to convince patients that it will. And if you are a physician listening, because I know a lot of doctors listen to this show, I'm telling you the God's honest truth here. Do not try to convince these people that peptides are going to be an option for them or that it's going to work for them. It might for a hot second. When it comes to BPC 157, I think when you have an acute injury, I think it really can help a bit. It's not nearly as potent as some of the therapies that I have access to that I've been doing in my clinic for years. I would not choose BPC 157 over PRP. And here's the thing about PRP, platelet-rich plasma. It's only as good as the individual that it is used from. So if you are malnourished, if you are nutrient deplete, if you are undermuscled, if you are inflamed, if you are rocking excess inflammatory adipose tissue, and we take your PRP, it is not going to be nearly as good as if you were in great shape and great health and fully optimized and vitamin D sufficient and HRT sufficient or hormone sufficient. Night and day. That is the truth. And peptides are not going to help, and regenerative injection therapies are not going to help. And I know that sucks because some of you are in such a bleak place and you are so desperate for help that you will try anything, or you will pay any amount, or you'll believe anyone who tells you otherwise. And I know that a lot of people lean on hope. And I have encountered so many people in the past few years who have come to me and said, I heard you on such and such's podcast and I went and tried microdosing and it was so amazing for my joint pain or for my autoimmune or whatever. And then it quit working. And I asked them, did you hear the part where I said it was reserved for metabolically optimized people only? And they said, yes, but I wanted to try. And so I get it. But sometimes when people hear hope, they don't listen to anything else. I know this from clinical practice. Patients literally would not hear anything else if they thought this is the thing, this is what's going to help me. It's just human nature. And they quit listening to the rest of the conversation. And then if they weren't listening and it didn't work, they would be sorely disappointed or mad or whatever. And that's fair. But a lot of times people are only hearing what they want to hear. And so I'm just here to be devil's advocate and tell you the truth. We're a very sensitive crew, us middle-aged ladies. We're a little more brittle as far as like biochemically, we're a little more brittle than we used to be. And we might need a little more hand-holding. We might need a little more detailed approach. And so I really want to encourage you to find somebody to work with. All of the details, though, that's what I'm going through inside the Menopause Rebellion. I'm trying to teach my ladies in there everything they need to know to be fully empowered so that they can navigate this, because there isn't always an awesome doctor down the road from you. There isn't always an awesome doctor even in your state. And so if you know the basics, because I'll tell you what, 9 times out of 10, it's the foundations. If the foundations aren't built, these hormones don't land. If you don't have adequate muscle, hormones and peptides don't even have a place to land and do their work. And I'm not saying they all land on muscle, but for the most part, yes. And if you're not metabolically optimized, they go down weird pathways. The estrogen goes down weird pathways. So knowing all of that, that doesn't take a fancy doctor. That just takes knowledge, and I will teach it to you inside the Menopause Rebellion. That is the entire reason I started this group, was because I wanted to teach middle-aged women who were sort of trying to navigate this whole crazy thing. And I commend all of you for doing the work, because that's the other part that I'm trying to teach in there is empowerment. How do you start talking to your health practitioners so that you can get what you need? What's realistic, what you can expect, what you should be able to expect, what your rights and responsibilities are. I want to cover all of that in there because I want you guys to feel fully empowered when you walk into a doctor's office and know what that doctor's limitations are. If they're not the one, that's okay. You don't need to get mad at them. We don't all need to be everything to everyone. Like, that's why they're specialists. But you need to know what you need to know so that you can go find someone to help you, because you can get yourself to a level through just lifestyle. Like, it doesn't require a prescription. It doesn't require a doctor's orders. You can get your shit together first, and then you are an awesome candidate for HRT, for peptides. Now, a word about HRT. Can you start that before you are fully optimized? Yes and no. This is the thing. Sometimes we need, like in the case of GLP-1s, for instance, in the case of progesterone, I think we need those things to get optimized, right? We need those things to get optimized. When it comes to testosterone and estrogen, things start getting wonky because testosterone likes to aromatize into estrogen. Your fat secretes estrone, which is a form of estrogen. In fact, that's the main source of your estrogen after your ovaries go offline. Your poor adrenals will try to take up some of the slack, but most of us go into it with our adrenals a bit crashed out. We will be discussing inside the Menopause Rebellion in detail how to work with that. I get that we need the estrogen to, and I've done lots of podcasts about this, so I won't go into detail, but as your estrogen wanes, you become more insulin resistant and more metabolically compromised, and your fat redistributes in ways that perpetuates that and makes it all worse. And so I do see the point of putting estrogen in there, but I'm telling you, if you put estrogen into an inflamed, metabolically compromised body with excess adipose on it, it is anyone's bet which pathways that estrogen is going to go down. And most doctors want to poo-poo Dutch tests and want to poo-poo looking at those pathways. But I'm telling you, especially if you like to drink a glass of wine at night, especially if you've got excess belly fat, especially if you have the inverted glutes I'm talking about, and all of your weight has packed onto your midsection and your legs and your butt have gotten really skinny and your arms are skinny, you know who I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. That is not a great body to be putting estrogen in. Things don't go awesome that way. So this is where I do like to utilize GLP-1s to kind of clean up the milieu, but you have to do that really strategically and you have to do it right. There is a way to do that elegantly, and there is a way to just hammer people with them and deplete their muscle even further while they're losing fat mass. And that becomes real messy real fast. So anyway, that's where we're at. I know this might be frustrating for many of you. I know this might be disappointing, but I really want you to understand that the concept of microdosing GLP-1s, or even keeping the dose very low, that is reserved, especially if you want some weight loss, not a microdosing thing, but definitely a low dose that can be achieved through low dosing of GLP-1s. You have to be doing all the other things. And we cover that in detail in the Menopause Rebellion. If you want to utilize peptides, and somebody's trying to convince you that you can use those instead of hormones, they're lying to you straight up. They are not the same thing, even close. Like the lock and key mechanism, not the same thing, not going to do the same thing. And if you've got inspo influencers, let's just for a minute look at all the people hawking the peptides, right? Let's just for a minute look at them. They all have phenomenal physiques. They all have great body composition. They all look that way before they started hawking peptides, and they probably all look that way or close to it before they even started utilizing peptides. Peptides have optimized them because that's exactly what they are. They are the frosting on the cake, but you have to bake the cake. And that takes years of dedication of being in the gym, progressively overloading to very close to failure, dialing in your nutrition, getting yourself metabolically optimized, getting your HRT optimized. And then you pepper in a little peptide and it does great things because it has a really optimized body to land in. They're selling you online the horse before the cart because they can make money off of it. Or they're going to get you into their community or into their circle of influence, and they're going to convince you that you are microdosing a GLP-1 when in actuality, you're going to be given a standard starting dose, which is 5 to 10 times what a microdose would be. And then they are going to tell you that just go to this company, they're getting an affiliate kickback, and they're making bank off of siphoning you off Instagram into these companies. And those companies will tell you like, yeah, hey, take this, this, and this, and this. And so they're kind of sell you on this idea. And if they're doing it well, they're going to get you strength training and they're going to get you eating well. And I'm telling you that 9 times out of 10, the eating well and the strength training will do the heavy lifting for you. And the peptide is secondary. But if you're doing all those things together, you're going to think it's the peptide. And it usually isn't. Now, GLP-1s are the exception. Those really can move the needle quite well, but you have to be doing all the things anyway in order for that to go well at the end. So not to get myself all mixed up here, you guys know I'm telling you the truth. The ones of you who are in the peptide space, you know I'm telling the truth here. And I know many of you out there are very ethical. I think some of the big names in the space that were kind of the OGs, I think those guys are incredibly ethical. Those guys are telling the truth, but there is a horde of women on Instagram that every time I see their stuff, my skin is crawling because they're preying upon middle-aged women like yourselves and selling you into a bunch of nonsense. And I'm telling you, if your knee hurts and you have 40 extra pounds to lose and you haven't worked out a day in your life and you eat junk food, BPC 157 is not your first thing to reach for. You should probably go to a PT and get some rehab. You should probably start working with somebody who can help you strengthen that knee. Start with muscle, start with movement, start with mobility, start with strengthening. Get your metabolic health in order because that metabolic dysfunction is driving the pain. That's a whole other conversation. I've done podcasts about that. Go back and look. I have a whole series called Orthopedic Medicine as a Scam. And I talk about it in detail because there is this terrible feed forward mechanism of when you become insulin resistant and you're packing on fat. It's not just the weight on the joint. There is this feed forward inflammatory cascade that self perpetuates. And as it starts going and that joint starts hurting more and more and more, and you stop moving and you gain more weight and you get more insulin resistant, now you are in a total hot mess. And it is like the circuitry is all screwed up and there is a reset breaker. And I believe those to be GLP-1s done right. There is direct mechanisms on cellular pathways that impact inflammation. But at the end of the day, we have to get the fat off because the fat is feeding the whole mess. And the best way to do that is to build muscle. That is the first step. The first step is not to reach for the GLP-1. The first step is to go to the gym and work with somebody. I highly encourage you, if you can swing it, hire someone who can help you get strong, a strength and conditioning coach, a personal trainer, somebody, a physical therapist, somebody who can help you get strong. You might have options with your health insurance to go to physical therapy and get started. And a lot of the physical therapists coming up really do appreciate strength training. They don't just do what they used to do, which was like put e-stim and ultrasound on you and call it good. Like they really want you to rehab it and they want you to get strong and they're going to help you. They're going to have you squatting. They're going to have you doing all the good stuff. So that's the path. That's still the best path. GLP-1s are an amazing, amazing adjunctive helper there. And then the other peptides are like the sweetener, but they don't do a whole lot if we're putting them into that big inflammatory mess I just described. And that is the truth. I have been in this industry a long time. I have treated a lot of those kinds of patients, and that is God's honest truth. Once they can get the inflammation down through the weight loss, coupled with the muscle building is so key here, you guys. It activates critical pathways that feed forward in the right direction. So there's this inertia we have to overcome. There's a 3 to 6 month period where you may not even feel like anything's happening. You might start to feel stronger for sure. You might actually start to feel your pain come down for sure. But it's around that 9-month point of like real commitment to this process with or without a GLP-1. It's around that 9-month point where you're like, damn, it's working. When that amount of muscle that you've built is working adequately, because your muscle's pathologic when you're metabolically compromised. Your muscle's marbled, it's inflammatory, and it's not friendly muscle. It's doing you a disservice at that point. We have to completely rebuild the system. And when we do, all of a sudden, the weight starts falling off, the pain goes down, or becomes way more manageable. And the person's whole life has changed. And because they've gotten over this hump of this chronic tissue level, cellular level insulin resistance, and the cells are now working well again, and you've got cellular health and cellular biology going in the right direction, that is when we apply peptides to really optimize. And I know I've got friends in the pharmacy industry, I've got doctor friends, I've got friends in the regenerative space right now who want to argue with me about this. That is fine. I have seen this process happen so many times with patients that I know when all the lights are on. I know when it's like, boom, I can tell when they walk in the door of the clinic. I'm like, bingo. And you know what gets them there? It's not the strictest diet in the world, although what you eat definitely matters. Don't discount it. It's when they really get active. It's when they commit to the process of getting active. And I'll tell you the real sweetener, probably way better than any peptide, going out in the sun. Going out in the sun regularly, getting regular sunlight. Someone asked in my community the other day, what do we do if we live in Seattle? And I'm like, I don't know. I have no good answer for you. I left the Pacific Northwest and I left that bleary chronic darkness because I was dying in the darkness and I needed the sun. And so, gosh, just getting a little bit of a solar callus, getting a little bit of I know the dermatologists want to scream skin cancer, but getting that little bit of a solar callus so that your skin handles the sun. I was outside the other day with my best friend in the pool. It was 103 out. We floated in that pool for hours and hours and hours and hours. And neither one of us are exceptionally tan people. We're not like, I'm a little tanner right now than I was then. We didn't burn at all. You know why? Because she's sitting outside all day. Well, not all day because she works her butt off, but she's sitting outside every weekend watching her kids play football. She has for years because she's had multiple kids playing football. She is out in the sun a lot. I am out in the sun a lot. And so we don't burn, and we eat well enough that we don't burn. And I'm not saying like, go roast yourself in the sun. I actually said to her, I was like, I can't believe we've been out here for so many hours. We probably should not do that. We had our faces covered, of course. Our skin has adapted to the sun is all I'm trying to say. And I'm not going for like a leathery old lady look. I'm just trying to optimize my overall health and insulin levels and metabolic health through adequate sun exposure. You can do it without, but it is monumentally harder. And I have seen in my very pale friends, I will say this is just anecdotal, but I have seen in my very pale friends and patients who refuse the sun, they are squishier. And overall, their tissue integrity is squishier, and their physique and body composition derails faster than my friends who have a bit of a, sun exposure. They just regularly, and excitingly, you can get really great benefits from the sun, even if you're in the shade, especially if it's green. Like if you're in a lot of greenery, you've got a shaded tree over you and the grass is around you and there's plant life. That's a great place to sit too and get a lot of benefit from the sun. I'm not saying you're going to get all the benefit that you would if you were in direct sunlight. And I do think some direct sunlight in the morning, in the evening, as the sun's setting, and then a little bit midday, don't burn, but a little bit midday is superior. But you still can't, that infrared is going to reflect off all that greenery and penetrate. And it penetrates deep into your tissues through your clothes. It's awesome. So just being outside is really the hack. That's one of the best biohacks there is. So anyway, I hope this was helpful. I hope that I didn't, totally blow the wind out of anyone's sails, but this needs to be understood not only by the doctors that are new to the peptide scene, those that treat it like they're the magic panacea. They, in the right hands, in the right patient, and in the right combinations, I think they can work miracles. And I am not pretending to be the end all be all peptide expert. But I will tell you that if you ask any OG peptide person who has been at this a long time, they will tell you that, in Jay Campbell's words, we don't put these into a dumpster fire of a human. And I'm not saying that to be derogatory, but that is probably the best description that I can think of. When I heard that, I was like, yep, that's true. It's just not going to go well. So if you guys want more, I'm building out a GLP-1 essentials, a peptide essentials, a microdosing GLP-1 essentials, metabolic health essentials, strength training. We're talking shop inside our bi-monthly calls. All of it is inside the Menopause Rebellion. That is where my brain is going, and my best content and my deep dives. And you can ask me questions and I can answer you, and there's no censorship. I hope you guys will check it out. It's over at skool.com. That's skool.com/Dr. Tina. And I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for listening to the Dr. Tina Show. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Fry. Theme song is by John the Guilt. You can watch the full video version of this podcast inside the Spotify app or on YouTube. As always, you can email the podcast at podcast@drtina.com. That's DRTYNA. And if you like this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also find all of my offerings on my website at drtina.com. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. See you next time, and thanks for listening. This podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practices of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice. I am a doctor, but I am not your doctor. No doctor-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and the materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content on this podcast is intended not to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice from any medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions.